My wife hid her pregnancy. Then I saw the baby's face, and David was halfway through his second cup of coffee when he saw the envelope. It sat alone on the kitchen counter, his name written in Jessica's handwriting, the kind she only used when something was serious. His stomach tightened as he opened it. Please come to St. Mary's Hospital at noon. I'll explain everything. That was all. No greeting, no signature. Just the weight of silence in 12 words. He stood there frozen, the morning sunlight spilling across the floor like nothing had changed, yet everything had. His first thought was that she was sick. Cancer, maybe. His second thought was darker. Maybe she'd been in an accident. But no, the handwriting was too steady, too calm. He checked the bedroom. Empty. The closet was open, a few hangers swaying. Her favorite scarf was gone. No sign of chaos, just absence. Their dog, Maisie, pawed at the back door. Even she seemed uneasy. In the car, the ticking of the turn signal felt louder than the engine. David gripped the steering wheel too tightly, knuckles white, heart pounding. For the last 6 months, Jessica had grown distant. She laughed less, avoided intimacy. At first, he thought it was grief from losing her mom. But when she started going out for walks at night, locking her phone, locking the bathroom door, he couldn't help but wonder. Was it another man? He hated himself for thinking it. But something was off. She had changed, physically too, subtly. She wore looser clothes, said she was bloated from stress. He believed her. He wanted to. St. Mary's came into view. His chest tightened. The last time they were here had been for a friend's baby shower. They left early that day. Jessica had cried in the car, said she wasn't ready. The nurse at the front desk looked up as he approached. She smiled gently. "You're Mr. Harper? She's waiting for you. Room 208. His heart sank into his shoes. He walked the hall slowly, each step louder in his ears than the last. When he reached the door, he paused. It was slightly ajar. A soft sound came from inside. A small cry. A baby. He pushed the door open. Jessica was there, lying in a hospital bed, pale but awake. Her eyes were wide, full of something between fear and hope. In her arms, wrapped tightly in a white and pink blanket, was a baby girl. David stared. He felt his breath catch in his throat. She looked at him and whispered, almost trembling, "David, this is your daughter." The room tilted. His legs felt weak. He took a step back. Everything inside him screamed questions, but no words came out. All he could do was look at the child, a tiny, sleeping bundle with a full head of curls and delicate fingers peeking out from the blanket. Jessica's voice cracked. "I didn't know how to tell you." He stood there, frozen in place, not knowing if the ground had just collapsed beneath him, or if, somehow, a whole new world had just opened up. David's hands clenched into fists at his sides. His eyes stayed locked on the baby, but his voice shot toward Jessica like a knife. "How long?" Jessica flinched. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. Then, softly, barely above a whisper, 9 months. David turned away, staring at the beige wall like it might offer some sense. The air in the room was too thick. He couldn't breathe. "You hid this from me." Jessica nodded slowly, eyes welling up. He paced once across the room, then stopped. His voice cracked. "How could you?" Her answer came in silence. David looked down at the sleeping child again. There was no denying it now. The baby had his nose, his chin. Her skin was lighter than his, but there was no question. She was his daughter. That realization didn't calm him. It made it worse. "Why didn't you trust me?" Jessica sat up straighter. Her face changed, not angry, but desperate. "I was scared." "Of what? That I'd walk out?" She blinked. "You don't know yourself as well as you think you do." That stung. David stepped back, as if the words had slapped him. Jessica looked down at the baby in her arms, then up at David. She wanted to hand her over, to close the distance, but she didn't move. David backed away again. this time toward the door. His mind raced through 100 images, hospital appointments, ultrasounds, late nights when she said she was with Rochelle. Every lie unraveled now, clear as glass. He thought about his father, about the shouting, the shame, the way he turned his back when David's mother needed him most. That wasn't him. He had spent his whole life proving that wasn't him. But now he stood on the edge of the same cliff. Jessica spoke softly. She has Down syndrome. The words hit like a brick. David froze. What? Jessica nodded, tears running down her face now. I found out early, after the scan. I didn't know how you'd take it. He didn't answer. He stared at the baby again. He saw the subtle almond shape of her eyes, the gentle slack in her mouth. Things he hadn't noticed in shock. Now they stood out. He stepped toward the window. Cars passed below. Life went on. His didn't. He didn't speak. He couldn't. He just walked out of the room and down the hallway, heart pounding in his ears. Outside, the sun had vanished behind clouds. He leaned against the cold hood of his car and looked at the sky. He didn't cry. Not yet. But something inside him cracked. Not because of the baby, but because the woman he loved had lived in fear of him. David didn't know how long he sat in the hospital parking lot. The sky shifted from gray to a soft gold as the sun began to set. People came and went. Nurses with coffee cups, fathers with balloons. He stayed frozen. Somewhere inside, his daughter was waiting. And so was Jessica. He rubbed his face hard with both hands, then stood up like his legs weighed twice what they used to. His footsteps felt slow, but his heart raced. He passed through the lobby without looking at anyone. Room 208 was still quiet, still partly open. He pushed the door in gently. Jessica looked up. She didn't say anything. She didn't ask if he was coming back. She just waited. The baby was in her arms, but this time, Jessica slowly lifted her, offered her forward, hesitant but hopeful. David stepped closer. His hands trembled. He took her. The weight was light, but everything in that moment felt heavy. The baby squirmed a little, then settled against his chest. Her eyes blinked open. They were dark, like his, but softer, rounder. Her tongue peeked out between her lips, just for a moment. One eye didn't quite line up with the other. Her nose was button-shaped. Her fingers curled around his thumb like it was the only thing in the world she trusted. David stared. He didn't know what he expected, maybe fear, or revulsion, or confusion. But what came wasn't any of those things. It was stillness, then warmth. He didn't speak. He just stared at her face. Every feature seemed delicate, precise, a message written just for him. Jessica's voice cracked behind him. I didn't know if you'd look at her and see love or leave. David swallowed hard. His voice didn't come right away. She's mine. Jessica covered her mouth with one hand and started to cry. He looked at the baby again. Her hair was soft and curled at the ends. She smelled like new laundry and lotion. Her skin was smooth and golden, a perfect blend of Jessica's fairness and his own deep tone. She had Down syndrome. That much was clear now. He had never held a child with it. He didn't know what life would be like. He only knew that this baby, with her sleepy, blinking eyes and quiet strength, was a part of him. And somehow, holding her, the storm inside began to settle. David looked up at Jessica. She was still crying, silently now. The kind of cry that only comes when you've held your breath too long. He walked over and sat beside her, still holding their daughter. He didn't ask why anymore. He didn't demand anything. He simply said softly, like a prayer he didn't know he remembered, "She's perfect." And in that moment, he meant every word. The hospital room quieted after the crying stopped. David sat beside Jessica, still holding the baby. Her breathing was steady against his chest. He could feel the rhythm of it, light and small, but sure. Jessica leaned her head on his shoulder. For the first time in months, there was no pretending, no avoiding, just truth sitting in the space between them. They stayed like that for a while. No one came in. No one needed to. The world outside slowed down. Later that night, a nurse came by and gently moved the bassinet closer to the bed. David laid the baby down, careful not to wake her. Then he dragged the stiff hospital chair beside Jessica and sat. Neither of them said much, but silence didn't feel like distance anymore. Jessica finally spoke. Her voice was tired, raw. "I thought about telling you so many times, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd look at her and see what she wasn't, not what she is." David stared at the baby. She stirred in her sleep and made a soft squeak. His voice came low, thoughtful. "You thought I'd walk away?" Jessica nodded. He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. "My dad walked away. Not physically, but emotionally. When things got hard, he just disappeared inside himself. I always told myself I wouldn't be like him, that I'd never be that kind of man." Jessica whispered, "You're not." He let out a long breath. "But I was afraid too. Scared of what kind of father I'd be. Scared of passing on the same hurt I grew up with." Jessica took his hand. For the first time in months, her grip felt strong. In the quiet that followed, they talked. Slowly, carefully. About the ultrasound. The diagnosis. The decision Jessica made to carry it alone. She told him about the fear, the guilt, the nights she almost told him but didn't know how. David listened. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he didn't judge. He just reached for her hand again. They named her Grace. The nurse brought in a birth certificate form, and they filled it out together. Jessica smiled when she wrote the name down. David did too. He couldn't explain it, but it felt right. Before they turned out the lights, a nurse offered to take a photo. Jessica hesitated, then agreed. David stood beside her. Grace nestled in her arms. The nurse counted down, and the camera clicked. Later, looking at the picture, David saw more than just a baby. He saw a second chance. A beginning, not an ending. Jessica looked at him in the dark. "Thank you for not leaving." David whispered back without thinking. "Thank you for giving me a reason to stay." And with that, they fell asleep. Not out of exhaustion, but peace. Something had cracked open, and something better had come through. 6 months later, David stood in the nursery, rocking Grace to sleep. The walls were pale yellow, the chair creaked gently under his weight, and the soft hum of a lullaby toy filled the room. Grace rested against his chest, heavier now, warm and safe. Her tiny fingers clutched his shirt, and he could feel the soft rhythm of her breathing through the fabric. The old version of himself, the man who sat in a car outside a hospital too afraid to walk inside, felt like someone he used to know. This version had learned to mix bottles with one hand, change diapers in the dark, and tell the difference between tired cries and hungry ones. He didn't always get it right, but Grace didn't care. She smiled at him anyway. David and Jessica had started going to a parent group for families raising children with Down syndrome. At first, he didn't say much. He listened. He watched. Then one day, someone asked him about Grace, and he told them everything. The room had gone quiet. Then another dad spoke. Then a mom. Then laughter. He realized he wasn't alone. Jessica watched him differently now, with a kind of quiet pride. She said once, while they were folding laundry, that she never expected him to fall in love so fast. David had looked up and said, "I didn't fall. I woke up." They got better at speaking the things they used to hide. Some nights, they sat on the back porch after Grace was asleep, talking about their childhoods. David told her things he'd never spoken aloud, about his father's silence, his mother's quiet sadness, how race and shame had been mixed into everything growing up. Jessica listened. She didn't try to fix it. She just listened. One afternoon, David's brother Mark came by. They hadn't spoken much in years. David opened the door, holding Grace, and Mark just stood there for a long moment. Then he stepped in, took her in his arms, and cried without a word. David hadn't seen his brother cry since they were kids. "I wish Dad could have met her," Mark said. David nodded, but deep down, he was glad Grace would never know the man who broke them. That night, after Grace fell asleep in her crib, David stayed in the room. He sat in the chair again, looking at her tiny chest rising and falling, her soft curls spread across the pillow. She was mixed, like him. She had Down syndrome. She would face questions, stares, maybe even cruelty. But none of that felt heavier than the love that filled the room. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I didn't know I needed you," he whispered, "until I saw your face." And in that moment, every fear, every doubt, every piece of the past let go. All that remained was love, a new kind, the kind that stays,